The courtroom was silent, so silent you could hear the soft hum of the ceiling lights when Cassandra Blake, the glamorous wife of billionaire developer Edward Blake, stepped forward in her designer heels. No one knew exactly what would happen next, but every person in that room felt the tension tighten like a wire. Moments earlier, she had whispered to her attorney, "Everyone has a price." She walked toward the bench as if she were entering a private negotiation, not a court of law. But Judge Frank Caprio wasn't for sale, and in less than a minute, he would prove it. What began as a routine traffic hearing was about to explode into one of the most shocking viral moments in courtroom history. A confrontation between unchecked privilege and a judge who believed justice belonged to everyone, no matter the size of their bank account. Before we dive into this unbelievable real-time unraveling of arrogance, consequence, and unexpected redemption, comment where you're watching from, and your local time, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful courtroom stories. Hours before Cassandra Blake ever set foot in Judge Caprio's courtroom, the story had already begun writing itself on the cracked asphalt of a busy Providence intersection. It was just after 7:30 a.m. The hour when parents rushed children to school, tired nurses drove home from overnight shifts, and the city slowly shook off its sleep. Lena Morris was one of those tired souls. She had worked a grueling 12-hour night shift at the hospital, caring for patients who'd spent the night fighting pain, fever, and complications that refused to wait for daylight. Her body felt like wet cement, and her eyelids fluttered each time she blinked. But she kept her focus on one thing, getting her 8-year-old son Noah safely to school. Noah sat in the back seat, swinging his feet and humming to himself, completely unaware of how exhausted his mother was. His backpack, frayed at the straps but neatly packed, lay beside him. He was excited about a school project that morning and kept asking if he could show Lena one more time. Lena promised, "We'll look at it again when I drop you off, sweetheart." "I promise." She forced a smile, though her hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. She had been late twice that month. A third tardy would mean losing part of her hourly pay, which she desperately needed. As she approached the intersection at Kennedy Avenue, the light turned yellow. She eased her foot onto the brake. Noah paused his humming and leaned forward, watching the world slow around them. Then it happened. A blast of sound, a horn, a streak of metallic black, and a luxury SUV tore past their front bumper so fast that Lena felt the air shift around her car. She slammed both feet onto the brake. Noah screamed. Tires screeched. A coffee cup flew from the center console and exploded onto the dashboard. The SUV didn't slow, didn't hesitate, didn't even swerve. It just sliced through the red light, like it owned the intersection. "Noah, are you okay?" Lena gasped. Noah blinked, still shaken, then nodded, but he clutched his seatbelt like he expected the world to split open again. A police cruiser parked at the far end of the block activated its lights. The officer, inside the kind who had seen too many near tragedies, didn't hesitate. He pulled out, accelerating after the SUV. For a moment, Lena sat in silence, breathing hard, listening to the ringing in her ears. She looked into the rearview mirror and saw Noah still staring at the intersection, wide-eyed. That could have been it, she thought. 1 second different, 1 inch different, and her entire world could have been destroyed. She steadied her hands and drove forward when the light changed. Still trembling, she didn't know who had been behind the wheel, but she whispered a shaky prayer of thanks that they survived. When Officer Daniels finally stopped the black Escalade a few blocks away, he approached the tinted window cautiously. He immediately recognized the driver, not because he had met her before, but because everyone in Providence had seen her face on local magazines, charity galas, and the society pages. Cassandra Blake lowered her window with a practiced flick of her wrist. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her tone dripping with impatience, not concern. Daniels responded evenly. "Ma'am, you ran a red light back there. You nearly caused a serious accident." Cassandra exhaled sharply through her nose. "Oh, please. I barely crossed it, and I'm late for a board meeting." "Just write the warning quickly." "It won't be a warning," Daniels said, pulling out his citation pad. Cassandra raised an eyebrow, as if he had just told her the sun would stop rising. "Excuse me." "You ran a fully red light," Daniels said. "The vehicle you cut off had to brake hard to avoid a collision. I'll be issuing citations for the violation." Cassandra gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Officer, Do you know who I am? Daniels didn't flinch. Your name will be on the citation, ma'am. I need to see your license and registration. Instead of complying immediately, Cassandra opened her designer handbag, an ivory crocodile piece worth more than Daniel's monthly salary, and pulled out her license with a slow, dramatic flourish. The registration followed. Then she did something Daniels had seen before from certain wealthy residents, but still despised every time. She placed the documents on the dashboard, along with a crisp, folded $100 bill. Her voice dropped to a silky hush. Why don't we just make this simple? Daniels straightened, his jaw tightening. Ma'am, remove the bill. Now, Cassandra blinked, taken aback. It's just a courtesy, officer. A friendly gesture. It's inappropriate, Daniels replied firmly, and it will not be part of this stop. For the first time, Cassandra's confidence cracked just a little. She snapped the bill back into her purse, irritated. Fine, she muttered. Just hurry. While Daniels wrote the citation, Cassandra tapped her manicured nails on the steering wheel, sighing loudly, theatrically. This is ridiculous, she said. We pay enough taxes to keep this city running. You people should have better things to do than harass someone who contributes more than you'll make in a lifetime. Daniels paused. Ma'am, I'm not here because of your taxes. I'm here because you endangered lives. Cassandra rolled her eyes. Oh, please. No one was hurt. They could have been, he said quietly. She said nothing to that. Later that evening, Lena finally had time to breathe. After dropping Noah off at school still shaken, but unharmed and working errands, she returned home to find a plain envelope tucked under her door. The city seal was pressed into the paper. She tore it open and felt her stomach drop. A subpoena for court. She was listed as a witness in a traffic case. The driver was named, clearly, Cassandra Blake. Lena sat on her couch, staring at the letter like it was a bill she couldn't afford to pay. She had never testified in court. She didn't want to. She didn't want trouble with powerful people, didn't want attention, didn't want to relive that moment at the intersection. But she also didn't want to let someone like that walk away unchallenged. She looked at Noah, who was building towers on the living room floor. He hummed softly, but every now and then she noticed him glance toward the window, like he still remembered that SUV flashing before him. The decision made itself. She would go to court, not because she had strength she didn't feel strong at all, but because she couldn't bear the thought of someone else facing that same moment, that same terror. For once in her life, she hoped the justice system, imperfect and intimidating as it was, would stand on her side. Meanwhile, in a vastly different part of the city, Cassandra was preparing for her day in court with the same energy most people reserved for an exclusive charity gala. Her stylist steamed a dove-gray blazer, her makeup artist adjusted the subtle contouring on her cheekbones, her assistant rehearsed lines with her phrases like, misunderstanding, rushing to help a family friend, and deeply respectful of our community. None of them mentioned guilt. None of them mentioned danger. None of them mentioned Noah. To Cassandra, court was a formality, a tiny inconvenience, a place where money usually spoke louder than rules. She smirked as her attorney briefed her. It'll be fine, she said. Judge Caprio likes community donors. We're practically sponsors of half this city. Her attorney hesitated at that, but didn't correct her. It was easier not to. As Cassandra was chauffeured toward the courthouse the next morning, she stared out the tinted window with an expression of mild annoyance, as if the city itself was beneath her. In contrast, Lena entered through a side door, holding Noah's hand. Her body was tense. Her heart pounded. Every step into that cold stone building felt like walking into a different world, one where she didn't belong, where people like Cassandra had the advantage before they even spoke. But that morning, two strangers, one overflowing with privilege, one weighed down by exhaustion, were about to meet before a judge who saw straight through both masks. And the moment their stories collided, a firestorm would begin. The hallway outside, courtroom 3A, buzzed with the low, restless murmur of people waiting for their cases, parking tickets, missed registrations, small fines that felt big to those who lived paycheck to paycheck. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The old wooden benches creaked anytime someone shifted. Then, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply unmistakable. The double doors at the end of the hall opened, and Cassandra Blake entered like she was stepping onto a runway. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor, each step echoing with an air of entitlement so thick it felt almost physical. She was flanked by her attorney, Mark Ellison, and a personal assistant who carried her bag like it was a sacred artifact. Every head in the hallway turned, some out of admiration, some curiosity, some irritation, but all eyes were on her. Cassandra brushed an imaginary speck of dust from her sleeve and then scanned the room with a gaze that moved over people like she was measuring property values. When her eyes landed on Lena and Noah, seated quietly near the end of a bench, her expression tightened, just a slight, fleeting crease between her brows. As if she'd just spotted a stain on an otherwise pristine tablecloth, Lena immediately looked away, her heart kicking into a faster rhythm. Noah held a small sketchbook on his lap, drawing superheroes with shaky little lines. When he noticed his mother stiffen, he nudged her hand gently. "Is that her?" he whispered. Lena didn't want to answer, but she also refused to lie. "Yes." Noah looked at Cassandra, then quickly backed down. "She looks loud." Despite the fear gnawing in her chest, Lena huffed a tiny, nervous laugh. "She does," she whispered. But the truth was, Cassandra didn't just look loud, she radiated the kind of presence that screamed, "I can do whatever I want." And for most of her life, she could. Her attorney leaned in and murmured something. Cassandra didn't nod or respond. She simply assumed he'd handle it. That was his job. After all, she didn't come to court to speak. She came to have the situation taken care of. Across the hall, another emotion stirred, not fear, but annoyance. Seated a few feet away, an older man with a worn leather jacket muttered under his breath, "Here we go. Another millionaire thinking the rules don't apply." The comment wasn't aimed at Lena, but she heard it, and it gave her a strange sense of permission to breathe again. Other people felt it too. It wasn't just her imagination. Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, do we have to talk? In front of everyone?" She squeezed his hand. "Only if they ask. And you did nothing wrong." "But she almost hurt us," he whispered. Lena brushed a curl from his forehead. "I know, baby. And that's why we're here." While they sat quietly, Cassandra was moving through the hallway with the ease of someone accustomed to being recognized. She paused to speak with her assistant, instructing her to send a message to her publicist, just in case the media tried to twist the story. She hadn't even been inside the courtroom yet, but in her mind, the narrative was already forming. She was the victim of inconvenience. She was the target of over-policing. She was being made an example of. Her assistant nodded dutifully while Mark tried to maintain a professional calm. "Cassandra," he said quietly, "let's remember that this is Judge Caprio's courtroom. He doesn't respond well to theatrics." She smirked. "Good thing I'm not planning any." But she didn't need theatrics. Her presence alone performed. "Besides," she added, "I've donated more to this city than the next 50 people in line combined. I doubt he'll want to embarrass someone who's helped fund his own community projects." Mark didn't correct her, but he also didn't look her in the eye. A few minutes before the doors opened, a bailiff stepped out and announced that the courtroom would begin seating shortly. The hallway collectively shifted, rising with the tense choreography of people who'd been waiting too long. Lena stood, her legs unsteady. Noah held tight to her hand, his drawing tucked under his arm like a shield. Cassandra moved forward without waiting for anyone. She approached the doors as if they'd open for her alone, until the bailiff raised a hand and said, "Ma'am, please wait your turn." It was the first time that morning someone had spoken to her without stepping aside. She blinked, startled. Then her cheeks flushed with something she didn't recognize right away. Embarrassment. She stepped back. Half a step. Just half. But to Cassandra Blake, that half step felt like an entire world shifting beneath her feet. Her attorney leaned in. "Please," he whispered. "Let's not start off badly." Cassandra inhaled slowly, smoothing her expression into something poised and neutral. Inside the courtroom, the wooden pews, polished floors, and the faint scent of old paper created an atmosphere somewhere between solemn and familiar. It wasn't glamorous, but it carried a weight of its own, the kind of weight that made people sit straighter, speak softer. Judge Frank Caprio wasn't in the room yet, but his presence already was. Lena took a seat near the middle. Noah sat beside her. Nervous but curious, Cassandra positioned herself in the second row, close enough to be seen, not close enough to seem eager. Her assistant took the seat behind her, holding her bag like it might require emergency protection. Mark Ellison sat stiffly beside Cassandra, flipping through documents he already knew by heart. As the last people filled the room, Noah pulled out his sketchbook to distract himself. He turned to a new page and began drawing the intersection again. Traffic lights, crosswalks, tiny cars. His little fingers worked carefully, but Lena noticed how he kept glancing at the door nervously. "You're doing great," she whispered. "I just want it to be over," he said. "Me too." She brushed his cheek softly. When the courtroom doors opened again, the murmurs hushed into silence. Judge Frank Caprio entered, his glasses resting low on his nose, his expression steady but warm, the kind of presence that could calm a storm or stand firmly against one. Everyone rose. Cassandra rose a half-second later than everyone else, as if she wasn't entirely sure she was required to. Once seated, Judge Caprio surveyed the room. His eyes held kindness, but also something firmer, an unspoken expectation that in this space, every person mattered equally. He glanced at the docket. "Let's begin," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room effortlessly. The bailiff called out, "City of Providence versus Cassandra Blake." A whisper rippled through the audience. Cassandra straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. This was her moment, her stage, her opportunity to reclaim control. She expected a simple exchange, a fine reduced, a gesture of goodwill, a donation mentioned. But within minutes, she would realize how wrong she was. She didn't know it yet, but this courtroom was not a negotiation. It was a reckoning, and Judge Frank Caprio was about to show her that justice had no price tag. Cassandra rose with a smooth, practiced poise as her name echoed through the courtroom. She placed a gentle hand on the back of the bench in front of her, as if steadying herself. Though the gesture looked more like she was preparing to accept applause, her attorney stood beside her, buttoning his suit jacket. Judge Frank Caprio glanced down at the file before him, his glasses slipping slightly down his nose as he read. "Mrs. Blake," he said calmly, "please step forward." The courtroom watched as Cassandra approached the bench. Her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor, each step resonating with the same confidence she carried into every boardroom, gala, and charity auction she had ever attended. But here, the acoustics felt different. The room didn't amplify her presence. It absorbed it. Lena sat rigid in her seat, holding Noah's hand. Her pulse thudded in her ears, and her breath caught when the judge lifted his eyes to examine the woman who had nearly destroyed her world in a single reckless moment. Noah gripped his sketchbook with both hands, tucking it against his chest like armor. Judge Caprio began with the basics. "You've been cited for running a red light at the intersection of Kennedy Avenue and Foster Street," he said. "Additionally, the officer reports that your vehicle nearly collided with another car. Do you understand these charges?" Cassandra nodded, but her posture suggested she wasn't taking any of this seriously. "Yes, Your Honor, but this is all a misunderstanding." Judge Caprio raised a brow. "Misunderstanding?" "Yes," Cassandra said, turning slightly toward the audience, not enough to be blatant, but enough to acknowledge she knew she was being watched. "The light was yellow when I entered the intersection. I believe the officer misinterpreted the situation." Her attorney chimed in quickly. "Your Honor, Mrs. Blake is a respected member of the community with a spotless record." Judge Caprio held up a hand. "I'll address her record shortly." Mark Ellison fell silent instantly. Cassandra smiled politely, as if indulging a minor inconvenience. "Your Honor, I have a very tight schedule this morning. May we resolve this quickly?" A flicker of humor crossed Judge Caprio's face. "Mrs. Blake," he said softly, "I assure you, court is the one place in the world where a person's schedule doesn't control the pace." Several people in the audience chuckled under their breath. Cassandra's smile stiffened. Judge Caprio turned toward the bailiff. "Please play the traffic camera footage." The lights dimmed slightly as a monitor switched on. A grainy but clear video played. The intersection. Cars slowing. The light turning red. Then, like a bolt of black lightning, the SUV streaked through the camera's frame. Gasps whispered through the room. In the front row, Noah flinched. The judge watched closely, not the footage. But Cassandra's reaction? She didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She stared at the screen with mild annoyance, as though the entire city's traffic infrastructure had conspired to capture an unflattering angle. When the video ended, the courtroom chewed on the silence. Finally, Cassandra spoke. "That camera angle is deceiving." Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Mrs. Blake, the light was red for a full second before your vehicle entered the intersection." "I disagree," she said firmly. "It's not a debate," the judge replied. "It's recorded fact." Her attorney stepped forward. "Your Honor, if I may, my client is very committed to the safety and well-being of this community. In fact, the Blake family has donated millions to programs." Judge Caprio gently interrupted again. "Counselor, donations do not appear anywhere in the traffic code." A small spark of embarrassment flickered in Mark's eyes. He looked down at his folder. Cassandra's jaw clenched. "Your Honor, I respect the law, but I also believe there are more constructive ways to handle situations like this. For example, my husband and I are prepared to make a significant contribution to the city's road safety initiative if it would help settle this matter today." The courtroom froze. People stopped breathing. Even the humming fluorescent lights suddenly felt louder. It wasn't the offer itself, it was how she said it. Like she was ordering a custom handbag. Like she was doing the city a favor. Like this courtroom was just another place where money smoothed sharp edges. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly in his chair. His expression didn't change, but the air shifted. Something electric, something dangerous. "That," he said slowly, sounded very much like an attempt to purchase leniency. Cassandra blinked. "Oh, no. No. Not at all. I'm simply saying that we're willing to support the city. That's a positive thing, isn't it?" Her voice dipped into a tone reserved for waitstaff, who brought her the wrong wine. Judge Caprio nodded thoughtfully. "Yes. Supporting the city is a positive thing." She smiled triumphantly too soon. "But bribing the court is not." Her smile cracked like thin ice. "I wasn't bribing anyone." The judge leaned forward, folding his hands. "Then allow me to be clear. In this courtroom, justice is never for sale. Not for $1, not for $1 million, not for $10 million. The moment hung in the air like a bell tolling. Even Noah, who didn't fully understand the words, felt the weight of them." Cassandra's attorney swallowed hard. "Your Honor, my client only meant—" "I heard exactly what she meant," Judge Caprio said. "And I'd like to hear from the individual whose life was endangered." Lena's breath caught. Her name wasn't spoken, but every eye in the room turned toward her. Noah squeezed her hand so tightly it almost hurt. "Ma'am," the judge said kindly, "would you please approach?" Lena's legs felt numb as she stood. She walked toward the bench, each step feeling like she was sinking deeper into cold water. When she reached the front, she didn't look at Cassandra. She kept her eyes on the judge instead. "Please state your name," Judge Caprio said. "Lena Morris," she said, her voice thin but steady. "And this is your son?" "Yes." Noah lifted his sketchbook slightly, as if to confirm it. "Ms. Morris, can you describe what happened at the intersection that morning?" Lena swallowed. "It was terrifying," she said, voice trembling. "I slammed my brakes so hard I thought the car would flip. If I hadn't stopped in time, we would have been hit. I thought my son was going to die." A ripple of hush traveled through the room. Noah pressed his face into his mother's sleeve. Cassandra shifted uncomfortably, for the first time showing a flicker of humanity, whether guilt or annoyance. It was unclear. Judge Caprio turned back to Cassandra. "Mrs. Blake, would you like to respond?" Cassandra lifted her chin. "I'm sorry," she felt frightened, but people exaggerate when they're upset. "It wasn't that dangerous." Gasps erupted. Even Mark looked at her like she'd stepped off a cliff. Judge Caprio inhaled deeply. "Mrs. Blake," he said quietly, "a child's life is not an exaggeration. Not in my courtroom. Not in any corner of this city." Then he added the words that would soon go viral across the internet, echoing through millions of screens. "No amount of money can buy back a heartbeat." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even Cassandra froze. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, something that looked dangerously close to recognition, or fear, or the first crack in a very thick mask. But the reckoning was far from over. The courtroom lingered in silence after Judge Caprio's words. No amount of money can buy back a heartbeat. It wasn't dramatic silence. It wasn't cinematic silence. It was the kind of silence that settles into people's ribs and stays there. Cassandra Blake stood frozen, her perfectly composed exterior, cracking just enough for anyone watching closely to see the shift. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her jaw tightening not with humility, but with a sense of someone unused to being confronted, especially in public. Her attorney, Mark Ellison, quietly cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said cautiously. "Perhaps," but Judge Caprio didn't look at him. His focus stayed on Cassandra, as if the two of them were the only people in the room. "I want to hear from you directly, Mrs. Blake," he said. "Your lawyer has spoken. The footage has spoken. The witness has spoken. Now it's your turn. Tell me what happened in that intersection." Cassandra inhaled sharply, lifting her chin. "I told you," she said, voice wavering between irritation and disbelief. "The light was yellow. I was already committed. If I had slammed on my brakes, someone behind me might have crashed into me." The explanation didn't match the video, but she clung to it like a lifeline. "And as for the so-called near collision," she added, glancing briefly at Lena, "I believe some people are more dramatic than necessary." Noah flinched. Lena pulled him closer, her eyes stinging with hurt. Judge Caprio's eyes sharpened, though his voice remained calm. "Mrs. Blake, I didn't ask whether other people were dramatic. I asked what you did." Cassandra crossed her arms. "I did what anyone would do in a hurry." The judge leaned back slightly. "Hurry, yes," she said, her confidence returning in small, flickering bursts. "I was on my way to a board meeting for a children's nonprofit, and I was running late. I didn't want to set a bad example by arriving after the meeting started." The irony of her justification rippled through the audience like a cold wind. "A nonprofit for children," Judge Caprio repeated softly. "Yes." He pressed his fingertips together, brow furrowing. "And you think that justifies endangering a child in front of you?" She hesitated. For the first time that morning, her voice faltered. "I didn't see them." "That," he said, "is exactly the point." Cassandra swallowed hard. Her composure was slipping, not all at once, but in tiny, noticeable fractures. Judge Caprio then did something no one expected. He turned toward the bailiff. "Please bring up Mrs. Blake's driving record." Mark stiffened. "Your Honor, may I ask the relevance?" "You may not," the judge replied. "This court is concerned not just with one incident, but with patterns of behavior that threaten public safety. A few clicks on the courthouse computer, a few lines of text appearing on the screen behind the bench, and then it happened. A growing list, small at first, then longer, unfolded on the display. Speeding, illegal parking, failure to yield, 2 prior red light warnings, a note from an officer 3 years earlier. Driver insisted on calling her lawyer from the vehicle. Citation reduced to warning by supervisor. Cassandra's face drained of color. Her attorney rubbed a hand across his forehead. The courtroom shifted in their seats. Murmurs rippling from bench to bench. "Mrs. Blake," Judge Caprio said slowly, "I see multiple warnings here. Many opportunities for you to correct dangerous behavior. They were misunderstandings," she snapped. He raised an eyebrow. "All of them." "I have a very demanding schedule," she argued, as if the world owed her exceptions. "I'm constantly driving between meetings, charity events, appointments. Sometimes things happen." "Charity events?" the judge repeated, tasting the words like they held a bitter flavor. "Yet here you are, using charity to justify negligence." Cassandra's cheeks flushed crimson. "That's not fair." Lena, still standing near the bench, spoke up quietly. "Fair? I almost lost my son." Cassandra's gaze snapped toward her. "I said I didn't see you. How many times do I have to apologize for you to stop acting like a martyr?" A collective gasp erupted. Even her attorney stepped back half a step. Judge Caprio's expression hardened, not with anger, but with profound disappointment. "I didn't hear an apology," he said. No," he continued firmly. "What I heard was blame, excuses, rationalizations." He turned to Noah, whose small body seemed to fold inward as the attention shifted his way. "Son," the judge said gently. "Are you all right?" Noah nodded shyly. "Yes, sir. You were scared that morning, weren't you?" After a moment, Noah whispered, "I thought we were going to be hit." Cassandra looked away, jaw set like she was the victim of some cruel public shaming. A long beat passed. Then Judge Caprio exhaled a slow, steady breath and spoke with a voice so calm it silenced the entire room. Mrs. Blake, this court is not evaluating your social standing, your wealth, your charitable contributions, or your family name. We are evaluating your actions, your decisions, and the impact they had on the lives of others. Cassandra didn't respond. Her eyes glistened not with tears, but with the burning indignation of someone unused to being held accountable. Now, the judge continued, I'd like you to tell this courtroom why you believe you deserve special treatment. Her head snapped up. I never said that. You implied it repeatedly. Cassandra's voice sharpened. I just want fairness. People like me, people who give so much, shouldn't be treated like criminals over one little mistake. There it was, not hidden, not subtle, bare, blunt, ugly. The courtroom reacted instantly, murmurs rising, heads shaking, a woman in the back letting out a sharp scoff. But Judge Caprio didn't react with anger. He reacted with something far more powerful. He leaned forward, elbows on the bench, and spoke with a stern, unwavering conviction. In this courtroom, a janitor and a billionaire stand on the same floor. The words hit Cassandra like a blow she'd never expected. Her pride faltered. Her posture lost an inch of height. Even her perfectly styled hair seemed to wilt around her face. And let me tell you something else, he continued. No amount of influence, no social connection, no charitable donation, and no last name will ever place you above the law here. Cassandra opened her mouth, then hesitated. For once, she had nothing ready to say. Her silence wasn't humility, but it was the beginning of something cracking, some realization she didn't yet know how to confront. Judge Caprio looked at Lena again. Ms. Morris, you may return to your seat. Thank you for your courage. Lena nodded gratefully, guiding Noah back to their bench. Noah glanced at Cassandra before sitting down, his expression soft and confused, as if trying to understand how an adult could act so recklessly. Cassandra watched him, and for a brief second, barely noticeable, a flicker of something crossed her face. Not guilt, not empathy, more like recognition. Recognition that the world she lived in was not as insulated as she thought. Judge Caprio folded his hands. We will take a short recess, he announced. When we return, I will determine the appropriate consequences. As he stood and exited through the chamber door, the courtroom erupted. Whispers, speculation, shock. But Cassandra Blake remained immobile. For the first time in a long time, she had stepped into a place her money could not soften or reshape, and it was only the beginning of her reckoning. When the recess was announced, most people in the courtroom rose with the restless shuffle of tension easing. Conversations erupted instantly, whispers, guesses, shock shared between strangers who suddenly felt united by the drama unfolding before them. People stretched their legs, cleared their throats, checked their phones. But Cassandra Blake remained perfectly still, rigid, silent, as if turning her head even an inch might shatter whatever control she thought she still had. Her attorney, Mark Ellison, approached her carefully as though she were a glass sculpture on the verge of breaking. Cassandra, he whispered, we need to talk. Strategy. She didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the table before her, unblinking. It wasn't humility or shame. It was something colder, tighter, disbelief. I've never been spoken to like that, she said finally, her voice low and sharp. Mark sighed. With respect. That's part of the problem. Her gaze snapped toward him. Excuse me. Cassandra? He paused, rubbed his temples, chose his words, like someone choosing which wire to cut on an explosive. You challenged a judge. In his courtroom, twice. She scoffed. I didn't challenge him. I corrected a misunderstanding. He took it personally. He didn't. No, she cut in. This is a power play. Judges love moments like this. Putting wealthy people in their place. It makes them look virtuous. Mark considered her for a moment, then decided silence was safer. But silence wasn't what Cassandra wanted. She wanted agreement, validation. The world she lived in was built on people reflecting her opinions back at her like polished glass. Mark tried once more. This is serious. He's not threatening fines anymore. He's talking about public safety, patterns of behavior. Possible mandatory programs. Programs, Cassandra snapped. For me. Mark shut his mouth. He didn't want to say it out loud. But yes, possibly programs for her. Her assistant, still clutching Cassandra's bag like a lifeline, leaned forward and whispered, "Do you want me to call Edward?" Cassandra hesitated. The idea of involving her husband flickered through her mind, but quickly sputtered out. Edward Blake was a businessman, not a magician. He wasn't going to storm through the courthouse doors and demand things go his way. He'd simply ask, "What happened? Why did you say that? What were you thinking?" Cassandra didn't want those questions. Not today. No, she said. Don't call him. Her assistant nodded quickly, pulling back, across the room. Lena sat down again with Noah, still trembling from being called to the front. It wasn't the judge who scared her. It was recalling the moment at the intersection, feeling again the terror of seeing that SUV blast past her windshield. Noah leaned his head against her arm. "Mom," he said quietly, "why is that lady so mad?" Lena sighed, stroking his hair. Some people get angry when they think the rules don't apply to them. But why? Before she could answer, an older woman sitting nearby leaned over and offered a soft smile. "It's because they've never been told no." Noah blinked. "They should learn." Then, the woman chuckled softly. "I think they're learning today." Lena gave Noah's hand a gentle squeeze. In that moment, surrounded by strangers who understood, she felt a small but real comfort. While the courtroom hummed with conversation, Judge Frank Caprio sat in his private chambers, reviewing Cassandra's case file once more. He had seen countless defendants. Poor, wealthy, confused, terrified, defiant, ignorant, arrogant. He prided himself on giving each of them the same measure of patience, compassion, and fairness. But Cassandra's attitude troubled him. Not because she was rich, not because she expected special treatment, but because she genuinely did not see the gravity of her actions. She had put lives in danger, then showed no remorse. He opened a folder containing supplemental notes the clerk had retrieved during the recess. Buried in the documents was something unexpected, an incident report from 3 years earlier. Red light violation. Near a school zone. Driver became verbally aggressive. Attempted phone call to attorney. Supervisor instructed officer to issue warning. A former department lieutenant who had since retired under scrutiny for mishandling certain cases involving influential families. Judge Caprio pressed his lips together. Patterns. Privilege. Protection. And now a near miss involving a child. This wasn't a simple traffic case anymore. It was a moment of truth for Cassandra, for the city, for everyone watching. He closed the folder slowly, knowing exactly what he needed to say when he returned. When the bailiff finally called everyone back to order, the courtroom shifted again, settling into silence. Cassandra lifted her chin, crossed her arms, and prepared to reclaim control, at least in her own mind. But as Judge Caprio entered, she sensed something was different. His expression was no longer simply disappointed. It was resolute, measured, focused. People rose, people sat, and he began. "I have reviewed the full history of this case," he said, adjusting his glasses, "including prior incidents that were handled unusually leniently." Cassandra stiffened. Her palms pressed against the table, her knuckles whitened. Mark Ellison swallowed hard. "Your Honor, Counselor," the judge said, "you will have the opportunity to speak, but I will speak first." Mark lowered his gaze. Judge Caprio turned his attention fully to Cassandra. "Mrs. Blake, let me tell you what concerns this court." The room held its breath. "You have been given warnings, concessions, and exceptions that the average citizen would never receive. Each time, the opportunity was offered for you to adjust your driving habits. Each time, you did not." Cassandra's lips parted in protest, but no sound emerged. "Today's violation was not an isolated lapse," he continued. "It was the culmination of years of believing you could bend the world to your will, even when lives were at stake." She swallowed hard. A flicker, just a tiny one of fear, crossed her face. Not emotional fear, fear of consequence. "Furthermore," the judge said, "your conduct in this courtroom has demonstrated a lack of humility and accountability. When given the chance to express remorse, you expressed entitlement. When given the chance to reflect, you offered justification. When confronted with the danger you caused to a child, you minimized it. He paused, letting the words sink like stones in still water. And when asked to explain why you should be treated fairly, you argued for special treatment instead. Cassandra blinked rapidly. Her throat tightened. Her facade, so polished and unbreachable, began to crumble at the edges. "Your Honor," she whispered. "I didn't mean—" "No," he said gently. "You meant exactly what you said. And that is why this moment is important." The courtroom leaned forward, not physically, but emotionally, drawn in by the soft gravity in his voice. "I am not here to shame you, Mrs. Blake. I am here to help you understand a truth you have avoided for too long. Responsibility is the great equalizer." Cassandra's eyes glimmered, not with tears, but with recognition. "The kind of recognition that comes when a mirror is held up for the first time," Judge Caprio continued. "I have dealt with reckless drivers, careless drivers, frightened drivers, young drivers, but the most dangerous kind is the confident driver who believes nothing bad can happen to them." He let that land. "And the truth is this. You were 1 second away from killing a child." A collective gasp swept across the room. Even Cassandra flinched. Even she couldn't deny the weight of that reality. "But," he added, "I do not believe people are beyond change, not even people who find it hardest to admit when they are wrong." Cassandra stared at him, speechless. For the first time, she wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She simply didn't know what to say. Judge Caprio closed the file. "We will now consider the appropriate consequences." He didn't say punishment. He said consequences. Cassandra felt it like a bolt of ice down her spine. This was no longer about money, no longer about influence. This was about her. And the moment she had never prepared for. The moment where her decisions finally meant something she could not buy her way out of. The air in the courtroom felt heavier than before. Not oppressive, just thick with anticipation. Like a storm waiting to break, people leaned forward slightly, held their breath, and watched as Judge Frank Caprio looked down at the file in front of him one final time before folding it shut with deliberate care. Cassandra Blake's hands twitched at her sides. She didn't clasp them, didn't fidget, didn't tremble. No, she was a woman who had trained herself to never show weakness in public. But her fingers, those tiny, involuntary twitches, betrayed her. Something inside her was cracking. Even if she refused to see it, her attorney, Mark Ellison, inhaled deeply, preparing for whatever tidal wave was about to hit his client. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses and spoke with a calm, steady voice that carried the clarity of a moral bell ringing in an empty hall. "Mrs. Blake," he began, "you stand before this court after endangering the lives of others, most notably a child. Your actions were reckless, but even more concerning is your response to those actions. Accountability has been elusive for you." Cassandra's lips parted, as though she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Not this time. However, the judge continued, "This court is guided by more than punishment. It is guided by the belief that people can learn, that transformation is possible, but only when the lessons are real, only when they touch the heart, not the wallet." Cassandra stiffened. Her instinct was to brace herself for a fine, a large one, perhaps, but a fine, nonetheless. Something she could write off emotionally and financially within seconds. Instead, Judge Caprio said something that made her stomach flinch. "I am ordering you," he said slowly, "to complete 6 months of community service in the emergency department of Providence General Hospital." A loud murmur erupted instantly. The emergency department. Not a charity gala, not a fundraising event. A hospital emergency room, the place where broken bodies, broken families, and broken nights collide. Cassandra's face drained of color. Mark stepped forward quickly. "Your Honor, 6 months. My client is not. She has a demanding schedule, a series of charitable responsibilities, major philanthropic obligations." Judge Caprio raised a hand. "She will attend to those after she attends to the consequences of her actions. But, no." The judge's voice didn't rise, but it cut cleanly through the air. "I've reviewed her history. She has lived years believing that her time, her name, and her money matter more than the time, names, and lives of the people she nearly harmed. This service will not be symbolic. It will be meaningful." Cassandra finally found her voice, but it came out brittle. "You want me to work in a hospital? What would I even do there? You'll assist in non-medical support roles, the judge replied. Transporting linens, restocking supplies, cleaning wheelchairs, guiding families to waiting rooms, delivering water, helping ensure patients maintain dignity during their worst moments. Cassandra stared in horror. Those are janitorial tasks. They are human tasks, the judge corrected softly. Tasks that serve people who are suffering. Her breath shook. She didn't like the way that sounded. She didn't like the idea of being ordinary, of being unseen, of being equal. And there's more, Judge Caprio added. Her heart dropped. This court will not allow philanthropy to be used as currency for absolution, but restitution is both ethical and necessary. Therefore, your family's foundation will contribute transparently to a citywide school zone traffic safety program. This contribution is not optional, it is mandatory, her attorney whispered urgently. Cassandra, don't speak, please. But she couldn't help it. I'm being singled out, she burst out, voice trembling between outrage and disbelief. This is humiliating, Judge Caprio regarded her calmly. Humility and humiliation are not the same, Mrs. Blake. One is forced, the other is chosen. Silence. You have the chance, right here, right now, to choose humility. Cassandra opened her mouth, closed it, then turned her head sharply toward her attorney, like a child, silently asking for someone to fix everything. But Mark looked defeated. His shoulders sagged. He shook his head. There was nothing to fix, not this time. While Cassandra grappled with the sentence, the courtroom's attention shifted back toward Lena and Noah. Noah sat with his sketchbook in his lap, looking up at the judge as though he were watching someone rewrite the rules of the world in real time. Judge Caprio addressed them softly. Ms. Morris, he said, I hope today brings you some sense of closure. Lena nodded, tears blurring her vision. It does, Your Honor. Thank you. And young man, the judge continued gently, looking at Noah. You were very brave today. Noah swallowed and nodded shyly. Then, unexpectedly, he stood, clutching his crayon drawing. He took 2 small, hesitant steps toward the aisle. Lena whispered urgently, Noah. But the judge smiled kindly. It's all right. Come forward. Noah approached the bench, tiny sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. He lifted his drawing with both hands and showed it to the judge. It was a picture of an intersection stick-figure cars, a bright red traffic light, and a child standing safely on a sidewalk. Over the red light was a bold, messy, crayon-drawn X. This is what I drew, Noah said softly, so she remembers not to go when it's red. Even Cassandra blinked. Judge Caprio accepted the drawing gently, his eyes warming. Thank you, Noah. I think this is the most important piece of evidence we've seen today. Those words, light, kind, heartfelt, broke the last remaining dam inside the audience. Sniffles, soft sobs, a collective swelling of emotion. Cassandra looked at Noah for longer than she intended. Something inside her twisted the first real human pang she had felt all day. Not guilt, not remorse, but a flash of vulnerability she didn't recognize. When Noah returned to his seat, Lena wrapped her arms around him tightly. Judge Caprio returned his attention to Cassandra. You will report to Providence General Hospital starting next Monday at 6 a.m. sharp, not 7:05, not noon, 6 a.m. Cassandra's jaw nearly dropped. 6 a.m. Yes. I don't wake up that early. That, he said, is precisely the point. The courtroom chuckled. Cassandra did not. The judge continued, his voice softening. I'm not doing this to shame you, Mrs. Blake. I'm doing this because every person deserves the chance to become better than their worst moment. But that chance only matters if you are willing to do the work. Real work. He paused. And trust me, after 6 months at that hospital, you will not be the same person who walked into this courtroom. Cassandra swallowed. A hard swallow. For the first time that day, she didn't argue. As Judge Caprio prepared to conclude the hearing, he offered final words, words that would stay with everyone, long after they left the courtroom. Money can build buildings, he said, but character builds communities. Today, I'm asking you to start building yours. He struck the gavel softly, the sound echoing like a quiet promise. Court is adjourned. And just like that, the reckoning was set into motion. 6 months later, Providence looked different, at least to one person. To most residents, the city was still the same mix of old brick buildings, bustling intersections, honking cars, and the familiar hum of daily life. But for Cassandra Blake, whose world had once been wrapped in tinted windows, charity galas, and silk-lined, quiet, those 6 months had transformed the city into something unrecognizable, because she had seen it from the emergency room floor. Before dawn, before makeup, before entitlement had a chance to wake up with her, every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday at exactly 6:00 a.m. She walked through the automatic sliding doors of Providence General Hospital. In the beginning, the hospital had felt jarringly loud, chaotic, and uncomfortable. She hated the plastic-feeling scrubs. She hated the smell of antiseptic. She hated the way people didn't glance twice at her, not out of rudeness, but out of sheer exhaustion. No one cared who she was. No one asked about her husband. No one mentioned her foundation. For the first time in her adult life, she was invisible. During the first week, she tried to talk to the nurses as though they were her employees. They ignored her, not maliciously, they just didn't have time for polite ego-stroking. They were too busy saving lives. She ran her first load of linens with resentment. She wheeled her first cart of supplies with stiff reluctance. Her hands blistered after her first shift. She nearly quit on day 4. But quitting, her attorney gently reminded her, meant facing the judge again. That thought alone kept her walking into the ER every time she wanted to turn around. By the 3rd week, the anger softened. By the 5th week, she stopped complaining under her breath. By the 8th week, she learned the names of the night shift nurses. By the 10th week, she began to see the world differently. She watched an elderly woman come in after falling down the stairs, panicked, confused, and silently ashamed that she needed help. A nurse named Sophia sat with her and held her hand while the doctor inspected her injury. Cassandra had never seen that kind of tenderness in her social circles. She met a teenage boy who'd been in a bicycle accident. His voice cracked when he called for his mother. Cassandra helped roll him into an examination room, and when he squeezed her hand through the pain, she didn't pull away. She witnessed a grieving father collapse in the hallway when a doctor told him they couldn't save his daughter after a drunk driving crash. That night, Cassandra sat in her car for nearly an hour before driving home, not speaking, not crying, just breathing. It was the first time she understood the weight Judge Caprio had spoken of. No amount of money could buy back a heartbeat. And then, there was the moment that finally broke her. It was a cold morning in late October. The hospital was slammed, staff shortages, a multi-car pileup on the highway. Flu season, everything converged in a storm. Cassandra was tasked with helping a terrified single mother whose daughter had been struck by an SUV while crossing a street. The girl's leg was broken, her face bruised, her small body trembling in pain. The mother kept repeating, "She didn't see the car. She didn't see the car coming." Cassandra froze. Those words echoed in her head with a merciless clarity. She didn't see them. I didn't see them. I didn't see the light. I didn't see. Later that night, when she got home, she locked herself in the bathroom, slid down against the marble wall, and cried for the first time in years. Deep, guttural sobs that she didn't even recognize as her own. She didn't cry because she was being punished. She cried because she finally understood how close she had come to destroying someone's world. And because privilege had kept her blind long enough to almost cause a tragedy she would never have been able to undo. When the 6 months were finally over, Cassandra didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel relieved. She felt small and fragile and human. She no longer strutted in heels. She walked in flats. She no longer barked orders. She listened. She no longer glossed over discomfort. She absorbed it. And most surprisingly, she didn't want to stop volunteering. Not because it made her look good, not because it boosted her reputation, but because it had become the first thing in her life that felt real. So, when she received the letter ordering her to return to Judge Caprio's courtroom for a final review, she felt a nervous coil twist inside her, not resentment this time, but something unfamiliar. Gratitude and fear. Fear that she hadn't changed enough. The courtroom looked exactly the same as the day she first stepped into it. Same wooden pews, same cool lighting, same dignified quiet. But this time, Cassandra felt the difference wasn't in the room, It was in her. People didn't turn to look at her with confusion or disdain. This time, they didn't recognize her at all. The lack of attention felt peaceful. Lena and Noah entered minutes later. Noah had grown a little taller, a little more confident. Lena carried less fear in her eyes, replaced by a warm calm. Cassandra stared at them, and to her own surprise, her chest tightened, not with defensiveness, but with guilt, and something like respect. When their eyes met, Lena froze for a moment. Cassandra expected anger, resentment, maybe even disgust. Instead, Lena gave a small, polite nod. Cassandra nearly broke. The bailiff announced the judge's entrance. Everyone stood. Judge Caprio looked the same, wise, calm, steady, but he noticed something immediately. Cassandra's posture was different. Less rigid, less guarded, less desperate to control the narrative. As the hearing began, he addressed her gently. "Mrs. Blake, it has been 6 months. How have you spent your time?" Her voice trembled. For the first time in this courtroom, her tone held no entitlement. "I worked at the hospital, Your Honor," she said softly, "and I learned more than I ever expected." He nodded. "Tell me what you learned." She swallowed, took a deep breath, and spoke the truth she had been running from for years. "That my life has been protected from reality," she said. "That I never understood what fear looks like, or grief, or exhaustion, or how hard people work just to survive a single day on their feet." She paused. The room stayed silent. "I learned that a mistake can destroy a family. I learned that a red light is not an inconvenience. It's a line between someone living and someone not." She glanced at Noah. Her voice cracked. "And I learned that I came within inches of crossing that line." Bride. The courtroom felt the words like a warm tide rising slowly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "To you, Judge, to the city, and especially to you, Ms. Morris. I know sorry isn't enough, but I mean it." Lena inhaled shakily, then nodded. Genuinely. Noah lifted his old drawing and whispered loudly enough for the front row to hear. "I think she remembers now." A ripple of soft laughter filled the room. Even Cassandra smiled, small, trembling, real. Judge Caprio's eyes softened. "Mrs. Blake," he said, "you have shown humility today, and humility is the foundation of responsibility. I believe this experience has changed you, not because you were punished, but because you were willing to learn." Cassandra lowered her eyes. Overwhelmed. He continued, "This court will consider your community service successfully completed. Your financial restitution has been processed, and your record will reflect the violation, but also the steps you took to make amends." Then, he offered her one final gift. Not leniency, not absolution, but wisdom. "It's not our mistakes that define us," he said gently. "It's what we choose to do after them." Cassandra nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The gavel fell softly. "Good luck, Mrs. Blake. I hope you continue to build the character I saw in this courtroom today." Outside the courthouse, Cassandra stepped into the cold autumn air and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom not from consequences, but from the weight of who she used to be. Lena and Noah passed by on their way to the parking lot. Cassandra hesitated, then spoke. "Ms. Morris." Lena turned. Cassandra swallowed. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being brave that day." Lena studied her, really looked at her, and saw a woman truly trying to be better. "You're welcome," Lena said softly. "Take care of yourself, Cassandra." Noah waved. Cassandra waved back. As they walked away, Cassandra felt a lightness spread through her chest. Not redemption, not closure, but something better. A beginning. At its core, this story is not about wealth, punishment, or public humiliation. It's about awakening. About the moment a person realizes that no privilege, no reputation, and no amount of money shields them from the responsibility they owe to others. Cassandra Blake walked into that courtroom believing the world bent for her. She walked out, realizing she must bend toward the world instead. Her transformation reminds us that true change doesn't come from fines or gavel strikes. It comes from experiences that force us to confront the lives around us. The mother working overnight, the child holding a crayon drawing, the nurse who doesn't have time to rest, the families whose lives hang by a thread. Justice is not merely a punishment. Justice is an invitation to grow. If you found this story meaningful, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful courtroom journeys.